And he, if you look at the big octopus, that is the org chart for the Center for Translational Research, Dr. Akins leads our mentoring and career development core. So he's been charged with helping everybody from both ends try and figure out how to do a better job around mentoring. We were just talking, when he leaves today, your assignment is going to be to create a mentoring plan. You just need one per team. We're going to send you a gold standard paper version for now. Eventually there'll be a version on the site, but we're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, it might be too glitchy to rely on or something like this. So
that's what we're doing.
Thank you very much. So my role in the ACCEL program is to build infrastructure around mentoring, education, and career development. So we do a lot of mentoring through the program, but the innovative part of it is trying to tie those programs together and make sure, especially in kind of the disseminated architecture, multiple institutions, different communities, that everyone has access to tools, and that at some oversight level, there are people making sure things are going well. So really the program is about infrastructure and for mentoring, education, and career development. In this, and I think you have copies of the slides, so I'm happy to answer any questions. If I go through too quickly, stop me. If you have a question later, just email me. But I want to talk about what is mentoring. It might seem like a simple concept, but just make sure we're all on the same page in definitions, types of mentors and mentoring, tips on how to find and choose a potential mentor, which for you guys, that relationship's already been set. But in getting a mentor to choose you, but in moving forward, you constantly want to re-choose each other. It is not atypical for mentoring relationships to sort of come apart, and you just want to be aware of if that's happening, that both people are aware of it, and you can move on. It's really not that big of a deal from any perspective, unless it becomes a big deal for that particular group. How to work effectively with a mentor, how to work effectively as a mentor, and then give you some of the resources that are available and that we're developing. So I meant to take that out so you could read ahead. So mentor was his actual character in the Iliad. It's the person's name, who was an older figure, who was Odysseus' friend, that was embodied by Athena. So mentor came to mean the perfection of wisdom and advice. Now we refer to mentors as having that role, and that's what people expect is generally somebody that's older, at least in conception, but that's not always the case, especially in contemporary academics. It's not your supervisor, it's someone you trust who acts as a role model, advisor, counselor, teacher, advocate, and or a protector, and that's really necessary for junior people that are trying to get going. Mentors act as their protector in the academic community, in the academic environments. Biggest thing that I wanted to highlight here is that the relationship and mentoring depends more on the trainee being committed. So the two things, identifying a good mentor and then getting commitment from the trainee. You can't be passive about it, and you should make known your satisfactions, dissatisfactions, and needs clearly and often. And we're coming up with ways to make that simpler, and we'll talk a little bit about how mentoring relationships really work in hospital settings and clinical academics. So the traditional model is that you have a mentor, and that's how I grew up. I had a mentor. There were some other people who would be co-mentors, but they assumed some of the roles of the primary person. But usually people think of mentoring as a dyad between a younger individual and an older individual, and that's the traditional model. That still works in a lot of instances, and at the University of Delaware in particular, that's still the model for mentoring. In fact, the contemporary model in clinical academics and where the field is going is in teams mentoring. So at Nemours, where I work, we've developed a physician mentoring program that it will become an associate mentoring program of around 5 areas. And there are data indicating that the average number of mentors that clinician scientists or people like me have now is 3, not 1. The average is 3. Some people have more. And often you'll see individuals working with 5 different people in these 5 different areas. And I put on top, one of the biggest things that mentors do these days is work-life balance and personal issues. There's so much pressure on academics and on clinicians to perform, produce money, getting grants and seeing more patients, that it's really difficult to balance the families often fall out of the equation to the detriment of the mentee. I mean, they do fine academically for a few years, and then they just crash. And we've lost quite a few people in the system who should be great investigators who just simply can't do it and have to make a decision based on their families. Leadership and managerial skills, the clinical educator expertise, and you can replace clinical with whatever term fits. This is usually for fellows and junior faculty in the MORS. But how do you teach other people? That's a mentoring role. The technical expertise, how do you acquire new clinical technical skills? And then your research expertise and making sure you have a comprehensive grasp on planning and activities. But the overall concept here is that contemporary models of mentoring are teams. You have multiple mentors, and we're trying to build in more successful programs of significantly more peer interactions. So there's a lot more peer mentoring and a distant component, because some of the areas, and it's true for you guys also, some of the specifics, the nitty-gritty of what you're working on, there may not be someone right nearby. And we brought Carolyn Jenkins from Charleston, so that's an example of a distant mentor. And there are publications on these pods, peer, on-site, and distant mentoring systems that work really well. But contemporary views is that it's a team. The infrastructure that we're working on to support these teams includes a number of opportunities that some of which I mentioned to you already. And I can go into as much detail as you want on any of these. But as you work on grant submissions, we provide mock study sections. So we'll work with you to kind of back out when your submission goes in and when we would want to see a mock-up of your grant and what specific pieces of the grant you need to have to the mock study section. This is something Heather mentioned, having a thick skin. So a mock study section is not for the faint of heart, because the person applying, who might be their first grant, comes to a room like this, and they just sit and they can't say anything. And we, the people who've reviewed grants before, do a review, just like we would if they weren't in the room. And they get to hear exactly how it's presented. And it's horrifying when people have worked for months on this document that is discussed for all of 10 minutes. And unless there's a big argument, the chair wants to move on. So the reviewers are very quick and concise, list things. People can ask questions, but it'll toughen you up pretty fast. The good news is that's what's going to happen to your grant, whether you want to see it or not is a different question. But seeing it really helps you figure out how you communicate with the audience that you're intending to communicate with. We do needs assessments. There are a significant number of online tools that will be coming online while you're part of the program, so we'll make them available and accessible to you, including development plans, mentoring plans, tracking tools for how the relationship with the mentors are going, a competency assessment tool for how well the mentor thinks they're doing and how well the mentee thinks the mentor is doing, so that we can identify any mismatches. We have grant writing workshops, and I think you guys are running, this is essentially a focused workshop over an extended period of time. We have for other types of grants. Programs for the mentors, a YouTube channel, so we've recorded multiple presentations on work-life balance, on how to, what's effective mentoring and how do you measure it. Mark Chinwitz did one of those. So those are being built into a library that will be accessible. And I talked to you about the MRDAs, it's Mentored Research Development Award. That's cash money that can help offset. Right now it's just clinicians, people with clinical responsibilities. But if you find yourself in a bind because a clinical partner can't get released from enough time to participate effectively, let me know, and we might be able to help you out with that. There's a negotiation with the division chief, but when you show up with money, those negotiations go much more smoothly than if you just show up with a request. And I'm sorry, I love this cartoon because one of the reasons we have oversight, people ask why do you need oversight, is because this model where you ask for a mentor but you get a minotaur because of a misunderstanding or you get a monster, happens more than you would like. It's just not something you want to have happen, and we need mechanisms to make those problems go away. All right, there's in the clinical, and I'll go quickly through this. On the clinical side, there's multiple, thank you so much. on the clinical side, so that when you're interacting, and again, remember this is coming from the perspective of the CTR, so from the hospital out. I don't have a lot of information to present from the community back in, except for a few examples. But within a hospital, it's not all the same type of academic that you'll get to. So there are clinician educators who are basically caring for patients and teaching. There are clinical researchers who do research in humans, and they will generally have access to database or specimens, and they're an expert on clinical research methodologies, but we distinguish them, at least in our system, between a researcher and a scientist. The scientist is actually driving research in that area. And the examples I use are disease or treatments or fundamental mechanisms. Again, we can make this slide appropriate to any type of situation that you're working in. But the scientists in the clinical realm, they usually have access to all kinds of data space for doing assessments. They have trainees working for them and technical support. And then we have primary scientists. These are people with substantial federal funds that are considered leaders in their field nationally. So just talking to a clinician doesn't mean you're talking to the right flavor of clinician when you have questions about the research or the understanding of what's going on. What do I have till 11? I should drink my coffee. All right, so again, you review all this and let me know, and I'll touch on these. So I put in 2 community examples, and we're working on more community examples for mentoring within the CTR, but there are 2 excellent ones. The links are here, and I'm happy to, anyone can provide this to you, right, if you want this electronically. But the Clinical and Translational Science Award that was received by the University of Southern California is working to connect young clinicians with professionals in the community to understand better how to serve populations and how better to connect what they're working on in their clinical research or their basic research to what's really happening in the community. And that's huge for both sides of that equation, and that's an excellent model CTSA set up. And then there's a mentor program that's centered out of University of Massachusetts that's a national mentoring partnership. And they have a pretty robust website, but they're working a lot on evidence-based mentoring. It's one of those things that people who've been around for all know it when you see it, but having metrics that let you know how people are doing, mentors are doing, especially mid-career to advanced career, and how well they're actually serving the people that are coming to them are a little bit difficult to put your finger on. Those metrics are a little hard, and UMass is doing a lot with that. They do a lot with school-based mentoring, community-based mentoring initiatives, and they're having a summit, which I'm trying to work out that I can go to in Washington in the end of January, this mentor program. But those kinds of ideas where there's a direct connection, we're pushing for and trying to figure out with this whole program, direct connections between the clinicians and the community they're trying to serve, something we're missing actually in healthcare. And then really understanding how these mechanisms work and how best to disseminate information and make sure that you can build upon the successes from previous iterations of these mentoring programs. These 2 are really strong. All right, so finding a mentor, which you already have. The focus is on the 3 C's, is what the mentors talk about. You want someone who's confident, and committed. If you have 1 or 2 of those, the mentoring relationship, just the data show, will eventually start to fall apart. They won't, if they're not committed to invest the time, they won't make it to meet. They'll be the most brilliant, helpful person in the world. If they're overcommitted, it won't work. If they're not confident, which is one most people don't think of, they will be challenged to allow the junior person to move ahead because they need some recognition. So they need to be at a point in their career where they're confident enough to just stand back. Whether the idea came from them or not, the key is that the mentee is the one that's being supported here. And confidence, I left for last because I always comment, there's a difference between expertise and experience. You can, not necessarily in the clinical arena, but certainly in the lab, you can have a lot of experience doing things wrong and interpreting things the wrong way for a long period of time that doesn't evince itself for a while. Lots of experience, but not much expertise. So the other scientists know you'll lose your grants and eventually you won't be funded anymore. But just because someone says they have 30 years of experience doesn't mean that they're necessarily the most experienced and the most expert person. What NIH says to look for, I'm not going to go through all of these, but NIH actually gives advice on what to look for in a mentor. And it's 2 full slides, right? The top one, and I put this first, goes back to that idea of being confident and having good ego strength. A mentor has to be able to tell you, no, it's not a good idea. And has to be able to step aside and will support you, meet with you, help you, but it's going to tell you when they see things are going wrong and not fall back and not want to hurt feelings. That's not the right terminology. And that's a hard thing to find, but you want to, as you move forward and these relationships are stabilized, I think that you have here, I would encourage you to think about this, because as you move forward with more projects and looking for more people, these are the characteristics that really work. And in fact, there's more research in this area that these are the characteristics that really work in a mentor and what you should look for. Patient is important. You're getting yelled at.
Those things work in life.
They work in life, so and some of all of this just seems so obvious that, but when you dig in and you actually look at relationships and the dynamics and departments and what's happening, it's clear that the mentee does not even want to be this person, but they feel like they should because the division chief suggested it, and the division chief might not even remember suggesting it. So by bringing focus back to all this, so you have a poor junior person struggling for years with a relationship that could go away like that. And really what we're trying to do is get people to focus on what's needed and what's effective. So I, again, encourage you to look through all of these. To find a mentor, and I'm going to skip this completely, but these are just examples of how people find mentors. You can contact, through Jen and Heather, you're probably already linked in to what's going on with ACECEL, what programs are available, educational opportunities. If not, you can link in with Erin Regal. She's the administrative coordinator for the mentoring group. And when you pick a mentor, again, I'm leaving this in so that you have it in the document. You actually should interview them. And interviews in quotes, it's not like you're sitting down for a newspaper interview or a job interview. But you really want to know what they're like. And personality goes a long way. That's a quote from Pulp Fiction that nobody gets. But it is important, and we're trying to make more and more mentors available to make sure that your style matches theirs. Again, same thing. Take the initiative. We encourage people, and I don't know if you've talked about having development plans beyond the focused effort that you're working on through this group, but I encourage it long term. So we have people list their short-term and long-term goals on an individual development plan so that they can work with their mentors. And there's multiple different sites that let you do that. So the ACECEL has a site with a digital development plan that's aimed at faculty. And it was developed initially at Medical University of South. Actually, it was developed at Vanderbilt. Then MUSC modified it, and they vetted some more of it. And then we vetted it even more and made it available through a REDCap interface. And we're still trying to assess that we have everything right. The American Academy of Medical Colleges has a compact, so switching gears, so the IDP things you can get online. We have people actually think about what's the agreement, what does the mentoring relationship mean, especially if it's long term. And we have that on the ACECEL, our version of it. And the AAMC has a version that they encourage, and I think will eventually require their postdoctoral appointees to use with their mentors. But clarifying what the relationship's about, how often you're going to meet. It sounds like regular life things should be done, even though a lot of times the junior person feels like they can't bring those things up. They should, and in fact, I can virtually guarantee you the mentor will appreciate it. And if they don't, then you can go back to that list of committed and whether they're committed to you or not. With the mentoring plans, you'll write one, I guess, as part of your assignment, and we have one version for Nemours that ties back in through Nemours' performance management planning system that's not accessible to ACECEL, but we'll try to figure out a way to offload it. And the ACCEL program has a mentoring plan interface that you can take advantage of. And the IEP. So these, if you get the electronic version and you click on the blue things, it'll take you to the link so that you can check it out. And the only people that are required to do them are the people that we fund with MRDAs, and then some of the pilot investigators we ask to do them. But we would appreciate it, if you want to use them, we would appreciate hearing your comments about them, because we're in fact sort of doing an extended beta testing interface. All right, so we'll talk about how to work with your mentor in these key areas. Again, these are the 4 main areas: communication, the content that you're discussing, your development in this, sort of, if you want to call it a career trajectory or this part of your career, and importantly, psychosocial support. It's supposed to be as a research mentor, right? How to work effectively as a research mentor. So this is what you can expect from your mentor. This is what the mentor should be thinking about. Expectations, make sure they're established. It's remarkable when you actually go and ask how many mismatches there are between what the mentor is expecting and what the mentee is expecting will happen. The frequency of the meeting, listen, right? Make sure you prompt them for feedback, and manage any disagreements and conflict between you as a mentor and them, but also between them and other people that come up as part of your job as a protector. And make sure that the whole relationship is based on trust. If the mentee, the junior person, is unwilling to tell you something that's going on, you can't even advise them, let alone help them. So communication is critical. For the content, again, I'm at 11. Have a few more minutes? Yeah.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah. And I do want to answer questions if anybody has them. This is just sort of a checklist, and we're developing an orientation